This is the Spiritual Genius Show, the #1 podcast for unlocking more of your spiritual genius so you can really have it all. Get ready to discover timeless strategies and secrets you can use. You'll also hear from world-class entrepreneurs, leaders, athletes, and celebrities sharing how they've tapped into their spiritual genius, along with how you can do the same. Without further ado, here's your host, Yakov Smart.
Welcome. In this episode, we're going to talk about why manifestation is not a choice. We're going to dive deeper into what manifesting really means and take an inside look into how we can use a framework called the map of consciousness to make manifesting that much more effortless for you. Appreciate you being here as part of this episode. As always, the show is continuing to pick up speed. If you haven't done so yet, make sure to go ahead and leave a 5-star review. Share this with a friend. I've heard this is unique and unlike anything out there when it comes to spirituality, business, and blending the two to create more of what you want, to experience more of what you want in both your business, your life, relationships. This show can apply to all of them. And of course, we talk a lot about business stuff here, but at the end of the day, these concepts, these principles, what I'm sharing with you here and what our guests share is something that's meant to be timeless and powerful. And if you haven't done so yet, we're about 8 or 9 episodes in. The past episodes really hit home. Make sure you take a moment, binge through some of these. It's a good time of year to be able to do that. And this is something that is just getting started. So let's start to talk about why manifestation is not a choice, okay? Now, I realize the title of this episode might be triggering for some people, right? Where, hear manifestation, okay, I just choose to manifest. What if I told you didn't need to choose to manifest? What if I told you you're manifesting whether you like it or not? That's what we're going to start the conversation with today. So let's start by talking about what manifesting even means, right? Because we hear that word a lot. Manifest this, manifest that. I manifested that. I want to manifest this. Well, what does it even mean? Okay. Now, the word manifestation, it has been around for a while. Okay. But only recently has it become really popular in the way that it is now, where it's known as something that's quote unquote supernatural. And of course, you have things like the movie The Secret, which if you're listening to this, you've probably heard of or seen. And things like that had a lot to do with bringing this way of looking at manifesting into more of the mainstream, making the idea very popular. But if we were to look at the dictionary definition of manifestation, here's what we'd see. Number 1, an event, action, or object that clearly shows or embodies something, especially a theory or an abstract idea. Number 2, the action or fact of showing an abstract idea. So notice that there's nothing in either of those definitions about meditating under trees or waiting for things to fall into your lap, okay? When it comes to goal achieving and manifesting more of what you want in your business and in your life, here's a simplified way to look at it. Manifesting means bringing a goal or vision into existence. I'm going to say that again. Manifesting means bringing a goal or a vision into existence. And then the question becomes, how do you know when something has manifested? One word, results. Results are when that goal or vision shows up in what's called the 3D. And notice when we say the 3D, I just want to be really clear, we're not talking about thoughts, we're not talking about ideas, we're not talking about daydreams, visualization, all that stuff can be great, right? However, true manifestation is the 3D manifestation of a goal or a vision, meaning that it shows up in a way where you can experience it in the 3D. And this definition of experiencing it is when you can see, feel, taste, touch, and or smell it in the 3D. That's what manifesting really means, okay? And when it comes to things like visualization, saying affirmations, or other metaphysical activities for your goals to manifest, time and a place for that can add a lot to the manifesting process. There's a lot of really powerful tools and techniques out there that can add a lot when done in a strategic, intentional way. However, that's tapping into what someone called the supernatural for accelerating goal achievement. And that's working with energetics, which is a huge part of the secret sauce here. Okay. At the same time, we need a litmus test. We need to measure manifestation, and how we measure it, want to be really clear. It's the 3D. Can you touch, taste, feel, smell it? Okay. The result tells us whether or not something has manifested. It's not necessarily a feeling, it's a result in the 3D that displays the full manifestation. So the other aspect of this, and this is where things could get a little bit activating for some people, I'm going to share this with you, okay? When we say manifestation is not a choice, okay, it comes down to this. It comes down to taking full energetic responsibility. Okay, I have a saying that I like, FERN, full energetic responsibility now. Okay, so for instance, let's say you were to believe or to think about or even consider this for a moment, that you are always manifesting, whether you were trying to manifest or not. As a matter of fact, listening to my voice right now, listening to this show, yes, you manifested that. If you weren't an energetic match to listening to this right now, in at least some way, you would not be listening to it. So based on that, manifesting is something that happens naturally. It's not a choice. And to take it a step further, I want you to consider this idea. What if you manifested everything that has ever happened to you and is happening in your life right now? Of course, this can be a triggering question, I know, but what if it were true? Playing with this approach gives you more responsibility. It puts you back in the driver's seat of playing the manifesting game and more consciously creating what you want. And what if you have a bunch of things happening right now in your life and your business that you don't really like? Taking responsibility for them, I want to be really clear, it doesn't mean beating yourself up about it or giving yourself a hard time. A lot of us as entrepreneurs and business owners, we happen to be great at beating ourselves up or judging ourselves. Not what taking responsibility means. Taking responsibility means the opposite of that. When you accept higher levels of responsibility, even as a thought experiment, if you don't have to believe this, try it, implement it, see what happens. It gives you more power to change things. It starts to lighten the burden and give you more peace of mind. The personal development world also talks a lot about responsibility and personal accountability. And to take things a step further, that's where that acronym that I shared with you a moment ago, FERN, really comes in. It's an energetic way of looking at taking full responsibility. The acronym is FERN. It stands for Full Energetic Responsibility Now. That means it starts with taking responsibility for your energetic state and your physical state, okay? And one way to bring yourself into present is to think that thought or to say it out loud, right? If you're feeling down, you're feeling out of it, you don't know what to do, you're feeling unclear, think this thought, say this phrase, full energetic responsibility now. When you say it out loud to yourself, it brings you into the present moment and allows you to look at whatever situation you're in a much more powerful way. It's the starting step to more clarity and having more power in that situation. So that's where we're starting from today, okay? And sometimes people will say, well, I don't know if I believe in the law of attraction, okay? And the law of attraction has gotten a bad name, right? The law of attraction is a universal law, meaning for something to be a universal law, it has to be true 100% of the time and not have exceptions, right? So it's kind of like if you live here on planet Earth and you were to drop a ball off of a 30-story building, right? Whether or not you believe in the law of gravity, that ball is going to fall, okay? And the law of gravity will win. You could maybe have the best argument. You could write a dissertation. You could write essays. You could start a rally. Do whatever you need to do. The law of gravity is going to exist, okay? So it's not about believing in manifestation. It's not about believing in the law of attraction. It's about accepting it, and instead of fighting against it, saying, you know what? If this is true, which it is, what can I do to have it work in my favor? How do I rig the game in my favor? That's a question that I like to ask myself. If I understand the energy, if I start with the energy, what's a way to rig this in my favor to make it more effortless and more rewarding so everyone wins? Okay. And one of the ways to do this, one of these concepts that just makes all the sense in the world, if you're not familiar with it, this is going to blow your mind. We might do a separate podcast episode at some point on this because there's so much to talk about here. But I wanted to make sure that I introduced it here and it fits with this topic. It's this idea, this modality called the map of consciousness. And to me, this is one of the most simplistic yet effective ways of understanding spiritual codes. Okay, if you're familiar with my definition of spiritual genius, it comes down to connection to source, connection to self, connection to spiritual codes. Okay, the spiritual codes, the way that I think about it is There are laws and principles governing our world. There are laws and principles governing the universe, okay? And the spiritual codes are part of this language that adds a certain level of structure and understanding to why certain things manifest, right? And it also adds an understanding to a different outlook, a different way of looking at the world. I look at everything from this lens that I'm going to share with you, okay? And I first stumbled upon this idea of the map of consciousness, okay, measuring energy, in a book called Letting Go by Dr. David Hawkins. And if you're not familiar with that book, add it to your list. Highly recommend reading it. And in the book, David goes into great detail understanding the map of consciousness. And this is something that's been around for centuries, if not thousands of years, in a lot of different spiritual belief systems. It's the idea of measuring energy and putting energy on a scale, right, and assigning words to it. And this was my first introduction to it. And the book wasn't as much about manifestation, although it talked about how certain energies attract certain energies. It was more about, using it in the process of healing and ascending consciousness, right? Which is really what a lot of this game is all about. So if we were to look at it in this lens of manifestation and creating more of what you want, we can see this as a tool, right? Because different energies correspond with different energies. And when I first read this, it gave me a deeper awareness. But what really made this more practical for me, it's an excellent book, one of my favorites, if not my favorite spiritual book. It's called Levels of Energy by Frederick Dodson. It's a dense book. It's about 600 pages, but I recommend taking a look at it because it walks through its entire scale. And this book, to my knowledge, is the most recent thing written about the map of consciousness, mapping energy, mapping the map of consciousness. The scale has slightly different numbers, right? Measuring different energy levels, but the concept is the same, right? Think of a ladder. Like imagine a ladder moving up and down energy levels. It's like steps on a ladder. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull up my copy of Levels of Energy, and I'm going to read the scale out to you, okay? And I'll give you the corresponding words as per the scale. And if you look this up online, if you look at the Hawkins scale, for example, there's plenty of visuals out there. You're going to notice a little bit different than the scale that I'm sharing here. And the reason I'm sharing this scale, this is the scale that I'm most familiar with. This is where, when I look at things energetically, these are the numbers that I've come to use. And this is what resonates most as truth for me. It's the most updated scale. At the same time, any scale is going to be relatively similar. Even in the book, it talks about how similar the numbers are, although these different authors and teachers are measuring it independently. And so let me read this out to you, and I want you to just listen. It's something you can look up in the book later, but I'll read you the numbers here, just so it becomes really, really practical. So we're going to start from the bottom, right? Like that Drake song. Start from the bottom, now we're here, right? So we're going to start from the bottom. Okay, so the lowest number on this scale, according to Frederick Dodson in Levels of Energy, is the number 30. Think of this as a scale of 0 to 1,000, okay? 30, here are the words that correspond to number 30. Guilt, shame, psychosis, humiliation, hatred. The next words on that scale is the number 50. Here you have apathy, despair, depression, hopelessness. Next up is grief, sorrow, and self-pity. That calibrates at 80. Next you have 100. Fear, worry, shyness, inferiority, paranoia. They all calibrate at that 100 mark. Next up, you have 120. You have craving, need, compulsion, unfulfilled desire. Next up on the scale is 160. You have anger, domination, aggression, coldness. Next up at 180, you have antagonism, criticism, discontent, complaint, and blame. Next up at 190, you have pride, superiority, arrogance. At 200, these are known as the mid levels of energy. Right now we've gone from low to mid. At 200, you have contentment, routine, functionality, boredom. At 275, you have courage, relaxation, eagerness, and fun. At 320, you have willingness, kindness, optimism, and activity. At 400, you have acceptance, interest, attention, neutrality. At 450, you have intelligence, knowledge, and reason. And now we get up higher on the scale. At 475, you have joy and creativity. At 505, you have beauty, creativity, imagination. 510, you have power, initiative, integrity. 530, you have love, intuition, appreciation. 540, you have humor and happiness. 550 is the number of unconditional love. 570 is ecstasy, exulsion. 600, according to the scale, is where enlightenment starts. You have bliss, peace, serenity, lightness. So at 700, you have oneness, non-duality, vast awareness. 1000 is infinity, divinity, what's referred to as Christ consciousness. Okay. So notice the wide range of energies. And there's so many different applications. There's so many ways to understand this scale and use it to manifest more of what you'd like to experience. And this is a reminder, right? If you want to attract certain things, you want to calibrate your energy. Just be aware of where you're showing up energetically, right? And it's not a matter of, okay, you're one set energy. Yes, we have, according to the author, we have this thermostat, right? Or this baseline energy, but we all have pockets of these different energies, right? And the higher someone is on the scale, the more, their pockets are typically higher, right? But we are human beings, we can shift our energies, right? Sometimes, I've had experiences where I've really calibrated my energy and tuned to a certain word or a certain energy, and within minutes, something different would start showing up, or I would start to feel different in more of the 4D, 5D, and then it would set me up to create different things in the 3D. Okay. So here is where this really starts coming to get practical. There's a lot of business stuff we could talk about here. Maybe we'll do a different episode. When I look at business, marketing, sales, energetic optimization in a business is huge, right? This is the map of that. This is the starting point to make sure the energies are calibrated and aligned. But for me, I want to share something with you that's pretty recent. I typically don't share recent things, but this is going to be an appropriate example. It's going to be really relevant. And it's this concept of energetic rehab. Okay, what does that mean, right? This is something that I came up with a few years ago. And then most recently, I'll share some examples with you. This idea of peak performance, right? You've heard it in business. You've heard it in personal growth, success. Important idea. I believe setting yourself up to win is more important than relying on peak performance, right? Because if the odds are stacked against you, if the setup is a low energy setup and you need to be in high energy, it takes a lot more willpower and energy to be able to get there. Is it possible? Potentially. But why not set it up so that things require less bandwidth and less energy? And where, based on something's attractor field, for example, or something's natural energy, that's where you can start to create from, right? So it's interesting because sometimes we have things that trigger us, right? Things that come up in our day-to-day lives. And even though we could be conscious people or purpose-driven, right? Sometimes we respond in ways that are low energy. We get angry, we get frustrated, all these different things, right? Or maybe, it's coming from a place of fear or, disempowerment, whatever the case may be, right? And typically, I found that if with some self-awareness, just looking at data, if you know what some of your triggers might be, and if you set things up energetically to not be in that trigger field, it becomes much easier to make the more aligned choices, right? So I'll give you some examples here to make it really, really practical. And anytime you're thinking about manifesting or, hitting a goal or creating something, right? I want you to, from now on, at least consider this scale, right? It is one of the most useful spiritual tools for understanding spiritual code. And when in doubt, there's great clarity that can be there. Okay. So I'll give you a recent example. So this is something that happened last week and it's something that I had a big realization after. If you're looking for more clarity right now, whether that's in your business, career, relationships, or any other area of your life, I've recorded a short training you can use to find more clarity, spiritual genius style. This training is my gift to you for being a listener of the show. To access it, all you have to do is go to spiritualgenius.org/gift. Once again, that's spiritualgenius.org/gift. Now back to the show. Over the past few years, I've gotten into hosting social events. Okay, and I started in 2022. Originally, it was just a way of meeting people. I lived in an apartment complex at the time, and what we would do would be, I'd host these happy hours, right? Originally for entrepreneurs, but then, just to people who or high vibe people, social events, right? A way to meet people as an adult. And there was a period where that was really fulfilling, really enjoyed it. But then I realized, I didn't really like it that much. So I stopped hosting these social events. And more recently, I got into hosting events specifically for men, right? As a way of connecting, meeting other men who were entrepreneurs, who were like-minded, spiritual. And I really liked the idea. And recently, hosted a men's dinner out here in Phoenix. We had 6 guys show up. The intention was to have it be like a mastermind dinner where every guy could share something that was working well for him, what his business was, what a challenge was, and that it was a big collaborative effort. And what I realized heading into this event, a few different things. But what I realized is for me with socializing, autonomy is extremely important, right? I like to come and go as I please. I remembered after the event, even being in college, being in a fraternity, and sometimes leaving my own events early because I was good. I was tapped out. There were other things that I wanted to do, right? And so I made it very clear in sharing the event that we'd go from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. And what ended up happening was kind of got all over the place. I didn't set timers on everyone's sessions, and with food and everything, it was chaotic. Bottom line, we ended up leaving there around 10:15, right, p.m. And I remember about 2 hours in, it was interesting because initially I was coming from that place of like high energy, very much present with people. By the end, I was secretly kind of annoyed. Not in anyone in particular. I thought the event went well. I think people had a great experience from what I've heard. It was more my experience and me not necessarily setting that container in the way that I wanted to, right? And when I came home, I reflected. I said, what happened was at one point, my energy started to dip. And instead of noticing, I fell into lower energy. I didn't take its full energetic responsibility as I needed to, like, nourishing myself, all these different things. I felt like there was a lot happening, right, with moving and a lot that I needed to do. And I started to get resistant. And by the end of that dinner, my energy had lowered, right, into, I'd say, high 100s type of energy, right, where I wasn't present with people. I was ready to get out of there. I was annoyed. And it was a triggering moment. It was some stuff to let go of. And the point being, in something like that, you could say, sure, you could have known better and done this and this differently. And yes, absolutely. However, that's swimming upstream in that case. The real way to prevent the issue, if I, looking back, that I know, like, okay, those things are my triggers. I feel like my, time is being wasted, or like, not feeling that autonomy and all these different things, is adding more structure. Initially pulling out my phone, having a timer, having, things start right on time, just like making it a very clear structure at 8:30, making sure that we wrapped up, and everyone wins that way, right? It's protecting the container there. So that's upholding energy. That's another example of, in that situation, if you know that an environment or a certain situation can be triggering for you, if it keeps happening, set it up differently. Okay, add more structure, right? So for instance, if there's someone, maybe it's family that you're used to like meeting in their house, right? Or a certain area, go meet at a place where they haven't been to you that's a higher energy place, maybe a nice hotel, nice restaurant. You'll find the energy of the overall conversation interaction is typically going to be elevated because you're starting at a higher point, right? Now you might say, well, I'm not that affected by energy. I'm really good. I have good self-control, willpower. Okay. To an extent, we all have our triggers, right? And if you're truly high consciousness, yes, maybe you can transmute that and be a whiz at it. But again, it takes that conscious thought, that extra effort. And looking back, I'd rather set it up in a way where I don't have to think about it, where that just kind of happens on autopilot, right? And so it's interesting because this week I got to dabble in some lower energies, right? The energies that I'm not really accustomed to spending much time in, right? Same thing with moving. I moved across town recently, and I found myself trying to find the entrance of this new apartment complex and driving around and just getting really frustrated and just like pissed off and just angry and irritable, all these different things. And just kind of observing the moment, okay, releasing that. At the same time, it's different pockets of energy that I'm used to. Okay. And one of the great things that I learned from Levels of Energy from Frederick Dodson, shout out to him for making this point, is the notch up strategy, right? So let's say anger is at 160 and you're feeling angry. Instead of trying to go from anger to love, as some people might do, go from anger to pride, right? Okay, from like, yeah, screw these guys to, yeah, better, like whatever. It's actually higher energy. So there's a relativity to the scale, okay? And that's just one little tip. So notice that everything, when it comes to business, right, which we talk a lot about on the show, you have the energies behind three things, right? You have the energies behind the entrepreneur business owner, right? You have the energy of the brand identity, right? And you have the energy of the business itself, operationally, its employees, all these different things. And there's a lot of nuance of understanding, okay, which activity, which person is at which energy, and how can it be calibrated to match the energy of, let's say, the target audience, right? There's some things that can be done there, right? It's almost like you could do an audit of your books, right? Do an audit of the energy of the business, right? And it's not just about feeling better or feeling sky high, not necessarily. It's more about, okay, if we look at it neutrally, how do we have these energies correspond? Or what's the next step up the scale for this thing that's not working? Or maybe it's too high energy to be working, it's to be lowered a little bit. There's a lot of different practical application there. So I wanted to share that with you because I look at this map of consciousness as many things. One of the things, it's a manifestation type of roadmap, right? Because everything, no matter if you're a living, breathing being, you're calibrating at some energy level right now. If you're listening to the sound of my voice, right? And by adjusting energy, either raising your energy, lowering your energy, you start to manifest, right? You start to make it that much easier to attract and receive or to give, right? Depending on the situation. The other framework that's really important to understand when it comes to manifestation, and I believe these are three things when it comes to abundance in any area. If you want further abundance and alignment, it comes down to three things in any area. This could be weight loss, this could be relationships, potentially, this could be business. It comes down to energy, comes down to identity, and it comes down to strategy. Now, the issue, and especially in business, let's focus on business here for a second, is a lot of business owners are just focused on strategy. And to make things worse, they just focus on tactics or mechanics or, little like one-off things they can do. Better than nothing sometimes. At the same time, if you start solving problems or looking at things energetically first, energy, then identity, who you're being, who you need to be, who the person is being, right? Cognitive dissonance, right? Typically, if you start with those things and match those things up, the strategy becomes much more apparent, right? And then from there, the tactics become that much easier, right? So I like to start with energetics. And if I find myself starting with strategy, typically it doesn't go as well, right? Strategy is simply this byproduct, but if the energetics are right, the strategy ends up taking care of itself. The strategy becomes that much clearer. And it's a little bit tough to explain right now, right? I'm saying it and it's probably resonating. If you want to see more examples, if you want to really experience this, right? This is where it gets really, really practical. Reach out. We can take a look at what's happening in the business, what you'd like to be happening. And typically there's energetic leakages. There's ways to elevate or further calibrate energy. And then we can look at identity and strategy and tactics and mechanics and all those different things. Okay. No one talks about this in the business world. It's talked about very rarely. The people that talk about this are typically just negating the strategy, negating the thoughts, words, and actions, right? They're more so, okay, it's just about energy, but it's also about your moves, right? Your thoughts, words, and actions. So it's interesting that manifestation, it's almost like there's two extremes that are prevalent right now. We have to find the middle ground, right? One extreme is the people who say, oh yeah, just manifest, just raise your energy, things manifest. Awesome. Don't worry about doing anything. Well, not quite what manifestation means, like we were talking about earlier. And then there's people who say, oh, manifesting is a hoax. You just got to work hard. Well, working hard can be part of manifesting, but if you're just working hard for the sake of working hard is just working hard, right? There's really not an intentionality there, right? And maybe through understanding the energetics first, it gives you clarity on what to work on, what to focus on, okay? And there's a lot of these different things. Another example, for example, is fascination, right? So everything has an energy that ties to it. Fascination, higher up on the scale, right? So the other day, I was at a little Christmas market. I was walking around and I noticed these vendors at some of the booths, the ones that tended to have the best turnout, that had the most magnetism, they had a fascination. You could just tell they had a look in their eyes. They were happy to be there. They were fascinated. They believed in what they were offering. They were fascinated by the concept. There was an energy of fascination and a likeness there. And the ones who didn't seem to be doing as well, it was like if you walk in their booth, they just kind of look at you like, hey, kind of bored. It's not nearly as captivating, right? So I encourage you, when you look at things that you're doing in business and how you're growing, where you're going, as you even look at setting goals and intentions, following more fascination is another big thing. Just another way of looking at the map of consciousness and energy. That energy of fascination can be contagious and really, really powerful. If you'd like more on this stuff, put together a guide called Manifestology for Ambitious Entrepreneurs. If you go to spiritualgenius.org/guide, you can go and download a free copy, review some of the stuff that we talked about here, shares a couple more examples. I think the guide is like 25, 28 pages, so it's not quite a book, but it's some really great stuff. We'll reaffirm some of these things. I want to leave you with this. Manifestation is not a choice. As you're thinking about upcoming intentions, as you think about how you can create more abundance in your life and your business, remember, you hold the power, right? It's available. It's at your fingertips. It's a matter of starting energetically, though. That is the initial point, right? 0 to 1, looking at things energetically. Sometimes helpful to get clarity from outside sources, but just remember, it's got to start on an energetic level. And this scale, this map of consciousness, when implemented correctly, there's a lot of nuances here, but when implemented correctly, okay, it can start to give you the roadmap of what to do next and the most streamlined path to creating and experiencing more of what it is that you'd like. Appreciate you being here as always. If the show resonated, if it made an impact at all, if you found it to be insightful, share it with a friend or two. Feel free to tag me on social media at Yakov Smart. We'll talk to you soon. Make it a great week. And remember, your spiritual genius awaits.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Spiritual Genius Show. Remember to subscribe and leave a 5-star review. When you email a screenshot of your review to info@spiritualgenius.org, we'll send you access to a special training on unlocking more of your spiritual genius in your business or career. Once again, the email address to send that screenshot of your review to is info@spiritualgenius.org. And remember, as always, the content of this episode and every other episode of this show are for entertainment purposes only. No solicitations are being made of the audience, and this show is not in any way intended to provide or be a substitute for any medical, legal, or financial advice. It is strongly recommended that you consult with a licensed professional before making any and all decisions around these matters. Till next time, stay well and remember that your spiritual genius awaits.